Hi. A while ago I did a video showing how even in the days of 9th edition and Primaris Space Marines you can still use the old Rogue Trader Vintage Marines to put together a credible Space Marine army that's fully playable on the board. And more recently I did a video showing how I had painted up a full company of Primaris Marines, and at the end of that I said I had plans for the other battle companies. And today I'm going to look at one of those because I've painted up some more Rogue Trader vintage figures and I've now created a full battle company using just these. Now these four figures here were in the original Rogue Trader vintage figure video. They're part of the command element for my company. There is a Dark Angels captain, a generic captain and lieutenant that I'm both are used as lieutenants in this army, and an apothecary. I've expanded on these to create a company champion and a company ancient. Now, both of these required slight conversions from Rogue Trader vintage figures. The company champion figure, I have simply glued a shield to his arm to give him a power shield. That shield is an old Marauder Miniatures shield from about the time of Rogue Trader again. And for the company ancient, this figure did have a hand flamer. It now has a simple standard made from wire. And before you get upset about the idea of me chopping up an irreplaceable figure, I was lucky. I managed to find this particular one on eBay for a slightly cheaper cost than normal because somebody else had already cut the hand off. And then to round out the command element of my army, I have a veteran squad, and this is made using figures released towards the end of Rogue Trader. My sergeant here, this is actually a captain. He was released at the same time as the Dark Angels captain I'm using to command this army. Then I have three figures which are fitted with Terminator honours on their shoulders, so they look like veterans. And finally, I have this figure here, which is a Marine in Artificia armour, and there were several different versions done to show Marines in unconventional armour. And that rounds out the command element for this army. In my original video looking at the Rogue Trader vintage figures, I showed how there were three basic styles that you could use for the tactical squads. There were single pose metal figures, such as the ones you see here. There were multi-part plastic figures from the RTB01 box set, like these here. Well, of course, I've added a single pose melter gun because I didn't want to use the flamer in that particular squad. And then towards the end of Rogue Trader, with the release of the Mark 7 Marines, there were the metal bodies with plastic arms and weapons. And it shouldn't come as any surprise that to get the 6 tactical squads I need for this battle company, I have just added one extra of each of these types of squad. For the single pose metal figures, my sergeant actually comes from the Rhino crew blister pack, and he was posed standing at a funny angle, so I glued a small piece of stone to his base and it looks like he's resting his foot on that. For the multi-part plastics, this time the squad is entirely made up using parts from that kit, except for the bases, of course, which I've replaced with more modern 32mm bases. I have the plastic flamer here, and for the sergeant I've used the bear head instead of the helmeted head. Then moving on to the Mark 7 Marines, and I've used another captain figure here. Even back in the days of Rogue Trader, Games Workshop were producing plenty of Space Marine captain figures. And there is one figure that I converted slightly by chopping the magazine off his bolter, so it looks like he is in the process of reloading. And between them, that gives me my full complement of tactical squads for my battle company. Before I move on to the Assault and Devastator sections of the army, I would just like to highlight these two tactical marines. These are single pose metal figures that I've used in the second squad of this type, but these were not released for the Warhammer 40,000 game. Instead, these were released for the Talisman game in the expansion Timescape, where a Space Marine was one of the characters that you could play. And in fact, that game was what got me into Warhammer 40,000 in the first place. So these two figures here actually represent the very first Space Marines that I ever bought way back in the 1980s. Moving on to the two assault squads that I need for this battle company. Here we have the squad that I showed in the previous Rogue Trader miniature video. And these were of course all single pose metal figures, and again I have used that style of figure for a second squad, duplicating some of the poses from the previous squad, but also putting in a few new ones for the Sergeant, who is very heavily cybernetically enhanced. I've got a Marine that's really just aiming his pistol, and this is one of the later Rogue Trader vintage figures when they were starting to look at the different marks of armour, and they released a series that had some of each. This was one of the Mark 6 figures. More significantly though, you will probably have already noticed that these have rather large backpacks, and that is because I went to eBay and I actually sprung for the cost of buying a set of 10 Rogue Trader vintage jump packs. Well, of course they weren't called jump packs back in Rogue Trader, these were flight packs back then, with the original Space Marine backpack being a jump pack. And I'll round out looking at this Rogue Trader Vintage Battle Company by looking at the two Devastator squads that I need. And this was the squad that I showed you in the original video. It has a single pose metal communications officer to use as the Sergeant, with a metal backpack with twin antennas. The 5 riflemen I needed are just multi-part plastics from RTB01. And then I used a variety of different single pose metal figures, as well as the metal figure with the separate heavy weapon here to provide the firepower in the form of 4 multi-melters. And I've done something quite similar for the second squad, at least in terms of the Sergeant and the Rifleman. The only difference is that for the heavy weapons, all 4 of these models were a single pose metal body and then a separate metal heavy weapon, in this case 4 las cannons that I've glued to the shoulder. And of course, as was the case in the other squad, these don't have the usual backpack, because of course putting that on would clash with the heavy weapon on his shoulder. And typically in my videos, this is the point where I lay out the entire company, which I'm calling the 4th company, and you see the army in all its glory, along with this Rogue Trader vintage casualty figure that I have glued to a 40mm base so that it can be used as an objective marker. But today I'm doing something just a little bit different, because I've also laid out the previous Primaris battle company that I showed in one of my earlier videos. So I've got 4th and the 5th companies. And of course, the Dark Angels have 3 battle companies in their order of battle. So in addition to these 2, I have also laid out the 3rd company, which all the figures for this are the sort of current style of Firstborn Marines, although some of the specific figures may date back as far as 2nd edition in the case of the Assault Squad Sergeants. Certainly there are figures from the 3rd edition Command Squad used in this, going right the way up to sort of like current generation veteran plastics. But pretty much all of these should be familiar to players of Warhammer 40,000. And this allows me to now pull back and show you not 1, but 3 battle companies in all their glory. So that's 3 down, 7 to go. Bye.